Okay, well, as everyone finds a seat, there's still a few open. We will get ready and get started. So this should be a real treat for you today. What you are going to hear are 3 presentations related to from video games to governance, examining ethics and politics and society. And let me tell you, what you're going to hear is going to be a lot of fun. So while you're listening, take down some notes, take down some questions you have for the presenters, because there's going to be plenty of time for questions after. And also take a moment, look around you somewhere right nearby. There should be a QR code. Be sure to fill out that QR code so that we can get that information back to your instructor that you are here today. And without further ado, let's get started. And the first presenter will be Kai Bradford.
Thank you. We're going to start off here with a question. If the general public had to choose between being a roguish renegade, doing things by their own rules, even if it meant harming other people, or a heroic paragon, fulfilling the ideals of the society that they were in, which do you think an average member of the general public would choose to be? Well, we have somewhat of an answer to this question. According to John Ebinger, one of the designers for the game Mass Effect, which had players answer this very question, about 92% of players were Paragon. They did not choose to be a renegade, which means of the 16 million people that played Mass Effect, about 14,720,000 people chose to be good. Hello, my name is Kai Bradford. I'm a communications major, and I'm an amateur video game designer. This is from a game that I made that tried to break down interpersonal conversation into a turn-based system to help explain how do you talk to people at parties. So examining things like ethics in video games has been a huge boon for me. And video games can be a fantastic tool for examining ethics in its players and in society as a whole if the game is designed in such a way that it allows the players to have a meaningful impact with the choices they have been asked to make. So we're going to go over 3 things here. We're going to go over a background of video games and ethics. We're going to talk about how games interact with ethics in a meaningful way. And then we're going to examine what I consider to be the pinnacle of an ethical video game. So for starters, let's go over a brief history of video games and ethics. And we're going to begin this little section here by offering a congratulations. You guys have all won the lottery. Hooray! And not just any lottery, you've won the labor lottery, which means that here in fantasy Soviet Russia, you have the privilege of working a job to feed your family. You're going to be a border patrol agent, checking people's paperwork and letting them into the country. And on your second day on the job, you're there in your little booth. It's sad. It's not a great time. You see somebody comes through, their paperwork's in order, you send them on through, and he stops and says, hey, just behind me in line is my wife, and her paperwork expired. We had to wait too long. Could you please let her in anyway? I know it's not the correct thing to do, but I just want to be with my wife in my home country again. And he walks on through. If you let her through, your pay's going to get docked, and your child is sick. They need medicine. And you see her walk into the booth. What do you do? That situation is exactly what players found themselves in 2014's Papers, Please, a game by Lucas Pope, where quite literally you play as a border agent checking people's paperwork. That is the game. And through this little booth wherein you examine the paperwork, you begin to see how all of these issues that the country is facing begin to coalesce into these people's unique problems. Do you let somebody through for an emotional reason when their paperwork's not right? If their paperwork is correct, but you know they're a bad person, should you detain them anyway? This game is one of the pinnacles of games that examine ethics. There's been a ton of games that have examined ethics in a way that is not as nuanced or accepting of other choices or options that have a very biased lens, but games still have the ability to be good. We have sources like the book Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, which talks about how games can make us better, as well as the 2009 article There Is No Magic Circle by Mia Consalvo, which addresses how games can help teach us about people's real life behaviors and what we can do to use games in a way that helps educate us. So let's talk about what makes an ethical dilemma in a video game engaging and insightful rather than oversimplified and boring. From the years of about 2009 to 2014, there was a huge rise in games that featured moral choices but some of them were not very, very good. So I've identified what I consider to be 3 principles that a game should utilize if it's going to be examining ethics well. For starters, ethics should be fully integrated into a game's mechanics. In the 2011 video game BioShock by Irrational Games, you're given an ethical choice of taking resources you need to live from a little girl at the cost of killing her. Or you can save her life, knowing it'll make your life way harder. However, whenever you find the situation in the game, all the mechanics stop. The camera slows down, it zooms in, 2 buttons show up, what are you gonna do? And the player knows they're being faced with an ethical choice. It's completely disconnected from the rest of the game that the player's experienced, and so it changes how they feel about making this ethical decision. Compare this to Spec Ops: The Line by Jaeger Entertainment is who published Spec Ops: The Line, where a warlord has 2 prisoners tied up by their hands and says, you need to choose one to kill or I will kill them both. Now, then the game just drops the player right into the situation. They're the one who has to point the gun and make the choice. Or they can try to shoot the ropes and drop them so the snipers can't get them. Or they can try to shoot the snipers that are trained on them. Or they can just walk forward and ignore the trolley problem that was put in front of them. This allows the player to feel the immersion that they have been feeling without separating them from the ethical dilemma that the game is trying to help them confront. The second thing a game needs to do is it needs to iterate upon the ethical dilemma it offers. In the game Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, there is a quest where you can choose to resurrect an evil tree into a horse and then it murders a village. What? That's not really... At no point later on in the game is the player going to go like, I've seen this problem before, the old resurrect the tree into a horse situation. That's not something you're going to examine, and the impacts of it don't resonate with the player. They don't feel like the choice they made actually meant anything. Compare this to Toby Fox's Undertale, which asks one ethical question: when is it okay to take a life? Every enemy, every boss, you can kill, or you can choose to spare them and show mercy instead. And then the game asks you that question in a different context again and again and again, allowing you to fully explore this ethical dilemma. Someone is detaining you because they think it's for your own safety. Are you allowed to use violence to escape? If the king of a country promised his citizens that he would kill you, and even though he doesn't want to anymore, he is bound by a duty to do what he promised, are you all right? Are you okay to use violence to defend yourself then? That's what Undertale does. It lets players fully explore the situation they're in and the ethical dilemma and how the context will influence it. The last principle is that the player's actions within the ethical dilemma should have a profound impact on the game's world as a whole. In Telltale's The Walking Dead, and a couple of frames after this little screenshot here, zombies are going to break through that barricade and those 2 people are going to get grabbed. And you have to choose who you're going to save. Who's going to be a better asset to the group? Who would be a better valuable person to have in this post-apocalyptic society? Except that it doesn't actually matter who you choose because 2 episodes later they're going to get killed anyway. Whoops. There is no impact in that choice. It doesn't matter, and the player does not feel as though this ethical dilemma means anything within the world of the game. Compare this to Supergiant Games' The Bastion, where you find the person who betrayed you in the last level bleeding out on the floor, and you have to make a choice. Do you keep your weapon and try to survive the fight out, or do you pick him up and try to save him despite what he did? Doing so means you give up any ability to defend yourself. It changes how the last level works entirely. That decision has an impact. It has a real consequence that the player feels for the rest of the game. So, since the theme is, after all, ethical citizenship, do we have a game that examines ethical citizenship well? Does it make ethical citizenship core to its gameplay? Does it iterate upon that ethical question? And does the player's choices have a real impact within the game's world and story as a whole? Let's talk about Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas is a 2011 game from Obsidian Entertainment set in the post-apocalyptic wasteland 200 years after nuclear bombs devastate America, and mainly features the players deciding who they should help support as these factions try to rebuild the world. The Hoover Dam stands as one of the only places left that could generate electricity, and whoever controls the Hoover Dam has the best shot at making the Mojave Desert what they want it to be in this new world. The entire question of Fallout New Vegas is who should rebuild the world. There are 2 factions at play here, the NCR, the New California Republic, and Caesar's Legion, both which are based on real-world governmental systems, with the NCR representing democracy and Caesar's Legion being a brutal yet effective autocracy. Now, the developers wanted to avoid something they called Jesus-Hitler morality, with one being clearly the superior choice to the other, and so there's a surprising amount of nuance to both sides. The NCR is a participatory democracy that respects diversity and includes its citizens in its governing system, but it's inefficient. The infighting from senators and the lack of a budget and a lack of efficiency means that the player sees just how failing this system is, and it meets these factions of people that are relying on the NCR for support that they just don't get. And in this post-apocalyptic world often means that those factions will no longer exist in a few years. Caesar's Legion, on the other hand, is brutal. They practice slavery. They will kill without mercy. They do everything they need to do to survive, but it does work. There are no people in Caesar's Legion who go without wanting, partly because they kill anyone who they just don't like. There's one merchant you can talk to in the game who says he only trades within Caesar's Legions because he doesn't even need to hire guards. There's no bandits in Caesar's territory. He killed them long ago. And that's not even talking about other factions, such as the libertarian CEO, Mr. House, who wants Vegas to remain independent and use the Hoover Dam to spark a new free market that'll truly save the world, or even the player, who can install themselves as a new dictator to take over. So we have these 3 questions. Let's see how Fallout New Vegas answers them. Is ethical citizenship central to the gameplay? Yes. In addition to running and gunning, you can talk to everybody. And you have to genuinely understand who they are and what they want in order to talk to them successfully. As a matter of fact, the final battle, the battle of who should control the Hoover Dam, you can avoid altogether if you genuinely understand how Caesar's Legion works. You can convince the general to stand down, not through an appeal to morals, but because taking over the Hoover Dam would stretch the Legion too thin to successfully survive. This conversation tree is built into everything, allowing a player to be nonviolent. They can be a silver-tongued charmer if they want and live in that way. Does it iterate upon its ethics? Yes. Every quest, every person you talk to, every group you meet has a story about the Legion, has a story about the NCR, has a story about Mr. House. Everything is baked into that one decision of who you should support and who you should build assistance for. It asks constantly, knowing new information, do you still support the NCR? Do you still support the Legion? Do you support being independent? Every pixel of this game has this ethical dilemma built into it, and it asks the players constantly what they think is the right thing to do. Does the player have an impact on the story? Yes. There are 29 distinct events that change the ending of the game, some of which have 29 different options for how to change it, which makes the technical amount of endings for Fallout New Vegas somewhere in the quadrillions, which is pretty cool. They will be very similar, though, with only minor differences here and there. But at the same time, they can be very different. You can choose to route a solar power plant's power into a farming installation to help a country out, or you can choose to funnel it into like a death laser beam that you use to wipe Caesar's Legion off the face of the map. 2 very distinct options, I would say. And so, yeah, this game answers all of these questions. It follows all of these principles, and it's still held up as a pinnacle of ethical game design today. This is from 5 months ago on the Fallout Reddit, where people are still debating what is the best ending. Some say the NCR is the best choice. Others say they're too inefficient, and you have to go independent. Anytime someone brings up Caesar's Legion, everyone yells at them because, no, don't do slavery. That's bad. What are you talking about? It's a debate that's still ongoing that allows the players to feel like they truly did examine this ethical dilemma. What type of government is best based on these circumstances? So in this speech, we examined a background of video games and ethics. We examined how games can successfully interact with ethics, and of course, how Fallout New Vegas serves as a pinnacle of ethical citizenship being represented in a game. And what's amazing about this is that because it's a game, players can explore this ethical dilemma freely without consequences. They can try for themselves. They can learn on their own. They can see what impact they have on the world, and that can inform their choices here in reality. With games creating this safe space for people to fully explore themselves in, it allows them to be a better citizen here in the real world. Because when they mess up in the game, it's no big deal. Because at the end of the day, it is just a game. Thank you.
You are right here.
Right. Perfect. Hello, everybody. That's going to be hard to follow up. I'm not going to lie. My presentation is not nearly as exciting as you can see here, although it does have a fantasy aspect to it, so, symmetry there. I'll be talking about The Ethical Politician, a Modern-Day Unicorn. My name is Tanner Brooksby. I'm a psychology major here. But one thing I really do love more than psychology is philosophy, and that's because I love to ask questions. In fact, I love to ask questions more than I love to get answers, which is why this particular presentation does not give you a whole lot of those. In fact, most of what we're going to be talking about, if you ask me what the solution is, I'm going to say, because it's complicated, and because people have been trying to find these solutions for a very, very long time. So, let's talk about unicorns. I love my little dramatic reveal there. What is a unicorn? Now, in fantasy, unicorns are often described as beings of pure light, horses with magical horns that can do anything that you wish as long as your heart is pure and you approach them with pure intent. They're kind of a deus ex machina in a lot of cases, where if the hero goes on a long journey and makes sure that they do the right thing the whole time, eventually they'll meet a unicorn, and that unicorn will solve all of their problems without any work on their part besides what it took to get there. So, what is a unicorn in our modern day society? Well, oftentimes unicorns are, the phrase unicorn is used today to describe something that is unrealistic and impossible to find, or something that's very rare, which is the case that we'll be using it in today. So, how is a unicorn like an ethical politician? Well, first we're going to list some qualities of unicorns, and then we'll list some qualities of ethical politicians and see how they compare. So, unicorns are pure of heart. They have a purity of intent. They do what they say they're going to do. If a unicorn says that you're bad and they're going to stab you with their horn, by golly, they're going to do that, because that's what unicorns are. They're incorruptible. A unicorn cannot be bribed. A unicorn cannot be bought. A unicorn cannot be convinced that its way of doing things is wrong, because it is solidly planted in the ideals that it possesses, which are that being a good person is what matters. They protect things that are good. In fantasy, unicorns often live in beautiful, magical glades that are full of wonderful wildflowers and frolicking woodland creatures where the influence of evil is nowhere to be seen. And it's not just this way because unicorns sit on their butts and don't do anything about it. It's that way because the unicorns stridently defend the land that they have chosen as their own. They keep it free from evil. They make sure that it's safe. And as mentioned with the pure of heart, they embody their ideals, not only in themselves, but also in how they deal with others. If you are a good person, a unicorn will treat you fairly. If you are a bad person, a unicorn will call you out and not offer its services to you. So, how does this relate to ethical politicians? Well, surprise, surprise, they're the exact same. Ethical politicians, we would also expect to be pure of heart, to be incorruptible, to protect the things they consider to be good, and to embody their ideals at all times. There is one other quality that a unicorn shares and an ethical politician also possesses, and it's one of the most important. They are both incredibly rare, even in habitats that support them. In fantasy, there aren't unicorns on every street corner. They're not running the local bakeries or the mayors of local towns. They live in far-off, secluded locations that, again, you have to go on like a magic quest to get to, usually. So it's not like you can just go, hop, skip, and a jump, and next town over there's a unicorn. And that's in fantasy, where unicorns are real creatures. Here in reality, they don't exist at all. The same can be said for ethical politicians. In habitats that allow for ethical politicians to survive, even then they can be exceedingly rare. So that brings us to the first question. Are we today living in a habitat that can support ethical politicians? Now, to answer that question, we're going to go back in time to a very different time period with a very different set of rules, but had the same issue. And this issue was brought up most poignantly by a man we know as Socrates. Now, he lived from 469 BCE to 399 BCE, and he had a lot to say about politics in his era, which, as you can see by this slide, is fair because it got him killed. Now, Socrates was a Greek philosopher who spent a lot of time being very annoying. It's why he's often referred to as the gadfly, because he would ask people questions that they didn't want to answer because the answers made them look bad. He was arrested on charges of impiety and corrupting the youth by the people in power of his time in Athens, and placed on trial, where his words were recorded by one of his students, Plato. That's pretty much all, like, how all of Socrates' words work. He wasn't a fan of keeping journals, so everything we know about him came from what other people said he said. During this famous trial, where he was defending himself for these charges, he commented on his own time spent as a senator, and about the struggle of being an ethical politician. There's a quote from the Apology, which is that recording of that defense, that says, "For I am certain, O men of Athens, that if I had engaged in politics, I should have perished long ago and done no good either to you or to myself. And do not be offended at my telling you the truth. For the truth is that no man who goes to war with you or any other multitude, honestly striving against the many lawless and unrighteous deeds which are done in a state, will save his life. He who must fight for the right, if he would live even for a brief space, must have a private station and not a public one." Now, if the society that he's describing there sounds familiar, I wouldn't be surprised, because our society today often discourages things like ethics, and encourages lawless and unrighteous deeds. Now, how did that turn out for Socrates while he was in government? While serving as a senator, Socrates was asked to try a group of generals for the crime of leaving the dead on the battlefield. It was illegal to try men as a body at the time. You had to try them individually, but Socrates was the only one that opposed it. He was the only one that said, "Hey guys, we actually have this in our laws that we're not supposed to do this," and everyone else is like, "Oh, guy, you're hushing on mellow. Just stop bringing that up." Alternatively, when the oligarchy of the 30 were in power, Socrates and 4 other men were brought aside and told to bring in a man so he could be put to death. He was the only one to refuse, as he described, the strong arm of oppressive power, going quietly home while the rest fetched the doomed man for his execution. So once again, he was the only one in a crowd of people that were all very willing to kind of throw the laws out the window when it was convenient for them to do so. Obviously, this did not end well for Socrates. This painting by Jacques-Louis David is titled "The Death of Socrates." And he was persecuted and threatened with impeachment, imprisonment, and even execution both times that he defied the government of Athens. In fact, he would have been executed a lot sooner had the old government not fallen out of power before they could. But even in the end, even when he was working outside of public office, he was still put to death for asking the wrong questions and upsetting the wrong people. So, was Socrates right? Is an ethical politician doomed to failure? He posits that in order to be an ethical person, you cannot be in a public office because a public office will require things of you that will go against your ethics and will destroy your soul. Now, souls may be a currency that we tend to care about quite a bit, those of us that want our souls to be good, to be light, like those unicorns. But in politics, souls are often not seen as very valuable, at least not above things like gold and oil and political power and money, or whatever it is that you're currently placing at your highest priority. To kind of think about this, I do have a thought experiment here. So I want you all to imagine that you are a politician yourself. An election is coming up that you would really like to win. And in fact, if you win this election, you are almost certain that you will be able to make changes that you see as ethical and right for the country you're living in. However, you are not sure that you have the political support to gain that position, but you do know a way you could get it. There is an alternative group whose policies do not align with yours, and in order to get the political support you know would win you the election, you're going to have to curry favor with them. The problem is you're going to have to give up some of your values to do so. Not forever, just for a few months, just enough time to convince this other party that you represent their interests, and then once you're elected, you can go ahead and do and make the changes that you wanted to do and make. What would you do? Is it ethical to betray your worldview just for a few months to ensure that you are put in a position where you can do the greatest amount of good? Where do we draw the line between ethics and what's necessary? My last thought here, and one that I would love for you guys to consider for the question section, because again, I don't have an answer for it, at least not at this moment, is what can we do as citizens to support our unicorn's habitat? What can we do to make it more likely, or at least possible at all, for a politician to be able to stand behind a lectern like the one I'm standing behind today and make genuine promises that are pure of heart that they can then back up because we give them the support to do so? What is our responsibility as citizens to support our unicorn? Thank you.
Sorry, one second. The philosopher Chris Weigel asked our class whether or not it's true, is it better to assume people are good or evil by nature? Can I get my water actually? Sorry. Thank you. I have come to the conclusion that it is best to believe both sides are true, but only if done in the correct way. Which is to say, if done in the wrong direction, could and already has led to the creation of a social system that breaks people down and makes them feel and perform worse, as well as act with less goodness. The answer is to believe that humanity as a whole are flawed, imperfect creatures, but that it is also correct to see people individually as good at heart. I will label the ways we think of people, the modes of thinking for clarity as I review them. Humanity version A. The main thing people with deeper empathy might say would be, we should see everyone in a positive light. This is something I would agree with individually. However, if we see everyone as good-natured creatures, we fall into a trap of forgetting good people can do bad things. When we're reminded of the reality of crime and other terrible things, it hardens our hearts against people. They must be villains from the start, we say, or they would have stolen or killed no matter what. When we build a system that says everyone will be good and no one will break the laws because they are good, we see those exceptions and we root them out of our good society. This type of system ostracizes those who make mistakes and radicalizes those whom the law oppresses. This forces anyone on the other side of the law into a cycle of criminal behavior, contributing to recidivism and more violent problem solving among these people in an effort to make up the time they lost in prison. Humanity version B. On the other side of the coin, then, it is to say all people are evil. We are self-centered, we act only for ourselves, we hurt each other's and ourselves. We break the law. We are often told, especially when young, never trust strangers, as no one outside of those we know well is to be trusted. They could all be kidnappers, muggers, murderers, scam artists, etc. This is not the case, but when we say all people as individuals are evil, we can create a society where each of us lives in fear. We may each start carrying weapons and become trigger happy, ready to defend our very lives at the drop of a hat. We would learn to hate everyone who doesn't practice our culture to the letter, out of fear that it means they too are evil and not to be trusted. We'd be gullible to fear-mongering and charismatic scam artists, despite our purported vigilance against such things. Humanity version C. So we come to believing both are true, and the issue with believing these in the wrong direction. As stated above, things turn out poorly when we believe everyone, with exception, is good, and equally so when we believe everyone, with exception, is bad. So when we combine them in the wrong way and we say humans as a whole are good and humans individually, interpersonally, are bad, we fall into both traps, creating a very disheartening and painful society to live in. I cannot speak for other countries, but as for where I live, we seem to have done our best to implement this very culture. One of the best ways to display this, I've mentioned a bit above, is our justice system. Who we throw in prison, and especially how they're treated afterwards, very clearly shows how belief that humanity as a whole is good can lead to vast social issues. As for treating each other as bad-natured, you can probably extrapolate from your own experience. With the media only showing bad news, how does that make you feel about the others you pass on the street? I'll linger on this version a bit longer to fully describe the issue. In America, we have a poorly functioning justice system. Some people say that it's too many people are being put away, others say not enough, or just that the wrong people aren't being imprisoned. Let's look at this from above then. That Congress passes Law X, criminal breaks the law, is tried and sent to prison. When released, the criminal is shunned from his community and finds it difficult to secure employment or an income, so the criminal commits another crime to survive and is put away again. You're likely to have assumed that the criminal was a bad person, or at least acted very stupidly. At the very least, you're unlikely to have pictured a person of shining goodness. This is the idea of a justice system. Good people don't break the law very often, if at all. We therefore catch the bad people and remove them from our good society and punish them so that they will be less likely to act as bad in the future. In practice, this is not how the system tends to function at all. Let's assume Law X, as shown above, was written by those who despise you and was written to oppress you and people like you. Would the criminal above still be bad, or would they be a martyr to your community, even though the system told you the criminal was a bad person? Less divisively, let's take the more common example of a genuinely good person, helps his community, works hard, does everything right. One day his wife gets cancer, and their 7 years of saved money is spent to treat it. This good person is left destitute and, thinking only of the welfare of his wife, breaks into the pharmacy to steal some medicine for her. He is then imprisoned for his crime. Finally, it's your turn. You can think of someone, you certainly can think of someone, corrupt government official, embezzling corporate executive, or perhaps a fraudulent religious leader. Make sure to think of someone who has undoubtedly committed a crime, but despite that remains free and has, at most, had to pay fines. Why have they remained out of prison? The most likely answer is this: the justice system considers them to be good people, that the crimes they committed were not enough to reduce their status from good person to bad person. They are allowed to remain as good people for a variety of reasons. A lot of it is probably bribery, but a good deal of it is also due to how we see goodness in society as tied to success. The point of this paper is not to criticize capitalism, but I need to display its relation to this issue in 3 parts. Humans used to be hunter-gatherers. Now we have to use money instead of finding our own food. We do not have the option to walk to another river and collect wild berries and hunt animals. We pay for groceries, we pay for hunting license, we pay for land to farm on. Number 2, the more money or power a person has, the more successful they will tend to be seen as by others. Number 3, whether it's innate or cultural, we tend to see the world under the just world bias, We see those who are successful as deserving of it as good people, and we see those who are in prison or homeless or otherwise suffering as somehow deserving of it as bad people. This fallacy is the thing that ties goodness to being financially or politically successful within our justice system. They don't put corrupt politicians or executives in prison because they are good people who contribute to society. The poor, homeless, and ex-convicts, however, no matter how moral they may actually be, have a lack of perceived success which tells the courts this is not a good person, and bad people must suffer for their crimes. And thus they suffer, put away or beaten because good people don't break the law. Humanity version D. Finally, we come to what I would consider to be the best way to view humanity. That is, humans are good-natured with exception. And humans are bad-natured with exception. And individuals are good-natured with exception. Remember, the original question asked was not if it's true. Our goal here is to determine the original question asked was whether or not it's true. Our goal here is not to determine whether human nature is good, but through belief to create a system that helps the largest number of people be the best most moral people they can be. So why do we care? Because you and I, we're part of this system that everyone that our system affects. If you slip up, do you want people to treat you poorly or to be understanding and try to help you do better in the future? If you do something admirable, should people be dismissive and rude, or should they applaud you and help you continue doing great things in the future? To best illustrate my point here, let's focus on our previous example, the justice system and laws. When we write laws today, we say good people don't break laws, so we just need to put it into law and then good people won't do this bad thing. However, what if we changed how we looked at this problem and instead wrote laws with the attitude, everyone will break this law if they have reason sufficient to them? Should we write a law at all that everyone will break then? If it's important that they don't break it to maintain social cohesion, then we probably should. Murder, theft, and assault are pretty big actions that have a negative impact on social cohesion. Theft is the most straightforward, so I will focus here. What is the reason people have to steal? Because they are greedy and selfish. Even the criminal, from the example in Humanity C, cared for his wife more than he cared for the pharmacy owner, company, or others who might have come to collect that medicine the next day. More commonly, though, people aren't thinking of others when they steal. Sometimes people will steal food or clothing from shops. Sometimes they will steal packages from other people's porches. People loot in a crisis or break into houses and take jewelry. These people aren't concerning themselves with the welfare of the people or companies they steal from. They're only thinking of one thing, themselves. Sometimes they're in dire need of cash, clothes, or food that they steal. Other times, they see their only means to climb the financial ladder is to take from others. So the best way to keep ourselves from stealing then is to indulge ourselves, right? The Dalai Lama, leader of a Buddhist sect that most here would probably see as forgetting yourself and giving everything away, says that humans have an innate sense of selfishness. Even in his altruism and love for others, he still indulges in his own self-interest. An ancient Buddhist thinker said that disregarding yourself in your altruism was idiot compassion. The Dalai Lama suggests we focus instead on wise selfishness, saying altruism does not mean you completely forget your own interests. We can make a system to benefit everyone equally, and in doing so, we are benefited. The idea here is that in indulging ourselves, we recognize humanity's selfishness, and by doing so, pacify our more evil inclinations to steal. However, indulging ourselves fully is probably going too far. If we were to indulge every person's greed and whim, our society would probably run out of resources. Perhaps instead we make a compromise. We guarantee every citizen some bread and a bed, some minimum amount that would keep them from resorting to more terrible things. There are a lot of systems that we could use to provide this minimum, but one example I take here is a universal basic income. Everyone gets just enough money every month to spend on the basic necessities. If you have another income, you can upgrade your necessities and afford other luxuries. With basic security, our society pacifies our evil instinct stemming from our fears. When we keep people off the street and we keep them from petty theft, next is to give them an opportunity for upward mobility. People like community, and they like being productive and being recognized for it. They have a hard time doing that within crime and criminal organizations because of how cutthroat it is. They would naturally start shifting out of those spaces because they are selfish and wish to survive. Focusing on the penal system again, not every evil can be beaten out of us. We have a survival instinct built deeply into our brains to survive at all odds. We fight and steal to keep ourselves alive. We need to understand that people have committed these crimes because they're human, and that all humans are potential for future criminals. Even the judge, jury, and our executioners. If we remember this simple fact while we build our jails, we can make a choice. Every person being a bad person deserves full and equal punishment because only through harsh punishment can we be made pure before we inevitably commit another crime. Or, alternatively, we can say humans are imperfect creatures. If we want a better world with less suffering and less crime, we should work to stitch these souls back together, rehabilitating them and giving them knowledge on how to live within society. We do this with suicide patients, detaining them from harming themselves and teaching them that they are not worthless, giving them coping mechanisms to help them avoid those thoughts going forward. Shouldn't we do the same for other crimes as well? We could reduce recidivism and give these humans a second chance at life. Once we've built a system that treats us all equally and as equally imperfect and selfish creatures, we can maintain that by doing the opposite for each other. That is, treating each other as good people. Trusting people can be dangerous, but those who would abuse your trust tend to be few and far between, and would especially be so if they had no need to con us. In fact, beyond just not being villains, humans have an innate sense of caring for each other, outside of their own selfishness. How Social an Animal is a research paper from the 1990s, in which they perform a variety of experiments to determine if people have real care for each other. According to the paper, the results of the experiment suggested that people would choose to help someone else even if they didn't need to, even if they would be punished for helping or rewarded for not helping. The paper concludes that we may indeed be socially caring animals, not just capable of caring for ourselves. Using this and other newer evidence to support it, we can conclude that your neighbors probably aren't out to get you. If anything, they're just as scared and tired in the same way you are. Beyond learning not to fear each other for perceived strangeness, we should also remember that it's through positive reinforcement that most learning happens. If you want your neighbors to do something annoying, try asking nicely. If they agree, reward them. What good people, being neighborly and such. And just as importantly, if someone is trying to be kind, even if it comes out as forced or ill-considered, maybe don't reject it. Remember that these are good people who are trying their hardest in a complex and draining world. Thank them for the kindness that they give you. If someone is being mean, try to look at their behavior from another perspective. Are they actually being hurtful because they're bad people? Or have they been taught that acting in this way is good? Perhaps it's a defense mechanism. Perhaps their friends wouldn't accept them unless they hurt specific outgroups. Perhaps they're outwardly projecting their own securities onto you, hoping you don't see their flaws and judge them for them. Remember that they've still got some good deep inside them. You don't have to be the one to bring it out in them. But if you remember this, you're less likely to perpetuate the cycle of hate that has been dragging us all down. In conclusion, I think it's best to look at the duality of human nature in conjunction and not single out either of our natures in building a society. And just as importantly, it's important to believe in the polarity of our duality correctly, lest we begin misguiding our constructed society into mistrust and hate. When we build social infrastructure, we build it for everyone. And so we have to remember that everyone is flawed, everyone is out to survive, everyone will break the law if they need to. And when we look at each other on the street, watch the daily news, or visit another country, we need to remember that every person is trying their best, and we are trying to emulate goodness and morality no matter how many times we fail. We want to be good people. Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot of fun and so many different little nuggets and takeaways. So without, wasting any time, let's get some questions from all of you. So who has a question? Don't be shy. This is your chance. Many of you are in public speaking, so this is your opportunity to participate in dialogue. And if you push it, I'll even ask you what course concepts you could relate to this, because lo and behold, I'm actually the course director for public speaking. I know. So I know a lot about it.
So, do I need to ask someone specifically? Is that right?
No, you can ask it to the whole panel.
Okay. Obviously these are all personal things to you, right? And your own character and who you've become. What has it meant to you being able to present this in front of however many people here today?
I know for me, gaming's been something that's been very important to me, and it's also treated as a very childish thing. And so for me, it's been nice because it gives something that's very important to me an air of legitimacy to it, to be able to present it in this context and with an audience of this size, shows that it's like, hey, this isn't just a bunch of people beeping and booping away with a controller at home. These are people that are trying to examine something very serious and create experiences that actually matter. So for me, just part of it is just doing the subject matter justice and giving it that air of legitimacy that I think it deserves.
To be honest, a lot of this stems from when I first learned about Socrates, and about the quote that I shared there really kind of resounded in my head and has never really left. Because I look at politics that's happening today, I look at the decisions that politicians are making, and I often have to ask myself, did they have any other choice? You need money to campaign. How do you get that money? If it's unethical, is it worth the cost that you paid to get it? And I think it's a really important thing to consider, because the answers are not clear. About how we can have a political system that is both ethical and allows for people who are ethical to get ahead of those that are not. So it's a question that I have and will probably have till the day I die.
For me, I guess it's meant confronting a lot of anxiety and nervousness, but also the hope that I can convey a sort of universal compassion for our fellow human beings, and the hope that I have, whether or not it's realistic, to hope for the future of humanity that now will not be particularly different from any time in history, in that when things get bad, they usually get better. And we have a trend that's moving upwards. And I hope that we can all kind of see that and share that hope and share that compassion that I have for other people.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And what's really amazing about this group of presenters is they've really taken us right to the hour, right, with their information, which is, I know, the people in the front here, their eyes were like, what? The class is over? I know, that's what happens when you have fun. But also, I want to, one little nugget, right, as a reminder, I want to highlight Seth's point here. This is such a cool experience to practice also, and related to your question, practice things that we care about in a way that we can also support each other. And being nervous when you're speaking is natural and normal, right? How beautiful is that? So let's give everyone up here another round of applause. I think it was a lot of fun. And before you leave, be sure to double check that you sign in with the QR code. Thank you so much for coming.